you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danny Laurel.
And I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day Friday. Bangko Sentral Governor Ben Jokno vows to continue sound fiscal policies as he is also set to head the finance department.
Continuity is also the name of the game in the Public Works Department. Incoming Secretary Manny Bonoan says he intends to continue the Duterte administration's Build, Build, Build program.
The Treasury plans to borrow up to 250 billion pesos from the domestic market next month.
And now that he is officially becoming the next president of the country, here's what Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has to say about his campaign promise of bringing rice prices to as low as 20 pesos per kilo.
The aspiration is 20 pesos. I don't know. I think if we work very hard at it, baka maabot natin yun. That's the aspiration.
We begin our broadcast with outgoing Bangko Sentral Governor Ben Jokno intending to retain National Treasurer Rosalia De Leon and most undersecretaries at the Finance Department as he is set to head the agency.
Now, Jokno also vows for continuity policy to help the economy recover further from the pandemic. Gerard de la Peña with the rest of the story.
President-elect Bongbong Marcos has named another key member to his economic team. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Jokno on Thursday accepted the offer to be the next finance chief. Jokno previously served as budget secretary for the Duterte administration and before that for the Estrada administration.
I'm committed to observe continuity of sound macro and fiscal policies that have helped position the Philippines among the most resilient emerging economies.
To ensure continuity, Jokno says he will keep most of the DOF undersecretaries. Meanwhile, Monetary Board member Felipe Medalla will complete Jokno's unexpired term at the BSP, which is until July next year. Medalla was also the Director General of NEDA during the Estrada presidency. Former President Noynoy Aquino's NEDA chief Arsenio Balisacan, meanwhile, will return to the post. He is the current chairman of the Philippine Competition Commission. As for the recommendations of outgoing Finance Chief Sonny Dominguez, Jokno says it is too early to make pronouncements. The DOF recommends imposing new taxes to help the government pay off its pandemic debt.
To me, the focus should really be on tax administration. Okay, and we need a lot of money to, number one, to continue our growth momentum, and secondly, to, of course, to service our higher level of public debt.
For Marcos Jr., there is a need to overhaul the country's tax system.
We are trying to create some fiscal space to reduce the load on ordinary citizens and maybe the tax load.
For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, We Are One News.
President-elect Bongbong Marcos has also named his picks for the Trade Department as well as the Department of Public Works and Highways. Former University of the Philippines President Fred Pascual will be the next DTI Secretary, while SMC Tollways President and CEO Manny Bonoan will be appointed as the next Public Works Chief. In a statement, outgoing Trade Secretary Mon Lopez describes Pascual's appointment as an excellent choice. Lopez believes that the agency will reach greater heights in the coming years, citing Pascual's, quote, competence, integrity, energy, and experience in different industries. Meanwhile, incoming Public Works and Highways Secretary Manuel Bonoan says the agency will still continue projects under the Duterte administration's Build, Build, Build program. He says the department will also launch new priority projects under the Marcos Jr. administration.
We have to be very selective, actually. At the same time, we need to provide support to agricultural production, particularly in farm-to-market roads and irrigation and water impounding projects. So we have to put all this into yung working list para makapag-simula kami ng husto.
The next administration's economic team is almost all set, with some old familiar names thrown into the mix. Does that signify a continuity of economic policies, or should we still expect them to shake things up? Let's get thoughts from Calixto Chicamco, political economist and columnist at Businessworld. Toti, good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, again, your thoughts on the composition of the economic team. I mean, you have familiar names here, Jokno, Balisacan, Medalla, and whatnot. These are familiar, experienced names. What does that signal for you?
Well, I think it's an 18. Almost all of them have the academic credentials, and they also have the experience. Medalla, Jokno, and Balisacan all have PhDs in economics and were former professors of the UP School of Economics, while Pascual used to be a consultant with ADB and former president of the University of the Philippines. So they're all tried and tested. So I would so I think the business is quite confident about the competence of this new economic team.
Okay, sir, is this a surprise to you in terms of the technocrats that have been chosen by this administration and the fact that continuity might occur? Is this something that has been happening when we talk about the economic teams, at least? That they've been. It seems that these people have been there throughout any administration, and then they're back back here again, regardless of who is at the helm. So, can we expect that continuity will indeed occur?
Yes, I think that the election mandate of 2022 was really for continuity. Given the high approval ratings of the president and unification of both the Duterte and the Marcos camps. So I would expect that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. or Bongbong will probably continue the policies of the current administration.
Now, Toti, earlier you mentioned majority of these economic managers are from the UP School of Economics. I mean, even in past administrations, that has been majority of the case here. Majority of economic appointees, at least, are from the UPSE. To your knowledge, what sort of philosophy does the school have, and what does that bring to the table?
Well, I think they are, they're all pro-market and pro-growth, but they're also aware of the need to have socially inclusive policies. Social Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, in particular, his field of expertise is on poverty and agriculture. So I would think that they would bring these kinds of expertise into their jobs, no? So they will try to focus on reducing poverty, at the same time growing the economy.
Are we expecting them to be at least more conservative or on the liberal side, or are we expecting a good balance here?
I think they would be at least, pro-competition. They're liberal. They would be liberal in that sense. No, they'll be not protectionist, and they will not be economic nationalists. No, but at the same time, I think they're keenly aware of the need to reduce the high income inequality and also to reduce the massive poverty. We have one of the highest poverty rates here in Asia.
Sir, are you seeing that with the tax consolidation plan or the fiscal consolidation plan that the current DOF is providing to the incoming administration? Incoming President BBM did mention they still need to look at that because he's wary on adding more taxes to the hardest hit pandemic sectors. But then the DOF is saying that this is necessary even if it's a bitter pill to swallow.
Well, that fiscal consolidation plan is really a political question. I mean, certainly we need to raise revenues to be able to pay off the debt that we incurred in response to the pandemic. So we need to, that's necessary economically, but again, it's a political question. I mean, I could understand that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is coming into office with high political goodwill, and I think he's kind of wary of imposing very painful measures at the start. So probably this will be still be followed, but perhaps mitigated in some ways.
Sir, in the campaign promises, of course, President or incoming President BBM was stopping short of basically saying tax the rich so that the poor can actually benefit. Sir, how can the incoming economic team balance between competition, liberal market policies, but also trying to heed to the President's call of being, let's say, more socialist in that regard and distributing the wealth of the richest in the country?
Well, liberalization will bring in more competition. And more competition means better deals for consumers. So that's where you can have a win-win situation. Also, more competition means certainly, in a way, more jobs. And it will also increase the competition for workers. So I think that's a winning formula. Those liberal policies will also bring social inclusion.
Now, other than, of course, those recommended tax policies by the incumbent finance department, what at least should be on top of the agenda here of the economic team, at least in the near term for the first 100 days?
Well, I think those digital tax transactions should be a priority because presently, many in the digital commerce are not paying their share of taxes. For example, those who are paying, booking advertising revenue with Google, Facebook, etc., they're not paying any domestic taxes.
Sir, what should we do with the bayanihan stimulus bills here? It's being repackaged into Bayan, Bangon Muli. Sir, but as you mentioned, it's time now for increased competition. It's time to be collecting more taxes. Should these stimulus packages continue to be increased, and for how long?
I don't think there's a need for a stimulus package now. As you know, our economy grew by 8.3% in the first quarter, the fastest actually in the ASEAN, due to the reopening of the economy. So I think what the administration has to make sure is that no new surge comes back, and we continue to open up the economy. As of now, we are just on level 1, right? Not yet on level 0. So I think instead of a stimulus measure, I think they have to double down on making sure that we have the proper healthcare capacity and we can continue to open up the economy.
Okay, just to circle back a bit to our discussion earlier, Toti, on tax measures, should the administration instead consider streamlining or strengthening current tax measures and policies that are in place instead of expanding it?
Well, the problem there is that I've been hearing that for the past 30 years, right? Better tax administration. I think it should be done, but it should not preclude the imposition of new taxes, really. So in order to be able for us to get back to fiscal sustainability, I think we really need to increase the tax to GDP ratio.
Okay, very important points there. As you mentioned, also very interestingly, maybe it's not time for another stimulus bill, but instead increase the means in which we can grow to fund, of course, that twinning deficit. Thank you so much, Toti Chiquiamco, political economist, and of course, Businessworld columnist.
Thank you.
Now, President-elect Bongbong Marcos says he is open to appoint his predecessor, outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte, as the next drug czar.
Now, as for other vacant positions, Marcos Jr. says he is not closing the doors on his political opponents as long as they are willing to serve the people. Paul Samarita tells us more.
In her first press conference with the media, incoming Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles was asked about her previous stand and criticism against the Marcos family. Cruz Angeles' old posts that were critical to the Marcoses resurfaced online, following her appointment as the next PCOO chief under President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
The I've told my story about how and when I changed my mind about it. So that's it. It's pretty much it.
Meanwhile, President-elect Bongbong Marcos will have his own special assistant. That is former Davao del Norte Congressman Anton Lagdameo, who is now part of BBM's transition team.
He knows me very well. He has been with us, working with me for past 10 years, mga ganon. So in terms of the working relationship, and then between the two of us, siguro we've already found the modus vivendi. So that should be an easy easy position for him to pick up on.
The position of a special assistant to the president started during the time of President Rodrigo Duterte when he appointed now Senator Bongo to the position. And speaking of Duterte, Marcos Jr. said he had met with the outgoing chief executive several times. Duterte supposedly urged him to continue his war on drugs.
The one thing that he was very assertive about was that ituloy mo yung anti-drug syndicate na sinimulan ko. Do it your own way.
When asked if he is open to the possibility of Duterte to be his anti-drug czar, Marcos said he can have it if he wants it. The incoming president also said that he is willing to give government positions even to his political opponents.
Ang aking criterion talaga sa kukunin namin kung sino yung marunong, sino yung magaling doon sa area na yun at handang tumulong.
Marcos Jr. also offered positions for Congressman Rodante Marcoleta and Professor Clarita Carlos, but they have yet to decide on the matter.
Pausing for a quick break, but coming right up after that. We'll check how our local bourse is moving this Friday morning after the index climbed back above 6,600 yesterday.
More of that and other stories when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel.
All right, Dan, analysts now saying that the latest economic pronouncements may bode well for Philippine equities. What are they saying?
All right, Jess, I'm going to read through some of the comments here from our usual equity analysts. First, from Papa Securities' Manny Cruz. These are solid names, of course, referring to the incoming cabinet for the economic managers. Familiar faces, these would help calm the markets and ease the hesitation of foreign investors. He also mentioned that Diokno, at the helm of the Department of Finance, will likely keep an expansionary fiscal policy. Another one is BDO's Jonathan Ravela saying, Diokno, Medalla, and Balisacan make a formidable team, and Diokno is as good as it gets. He did mention it is good for the market because it gives a semblance of continuity for the current economic and fiscal policies. He also said that investors are slowly warming up to the economic team. And finally, we've also got Mike Ricafort of RCBC, referring, of course, to Bonoan and the new DTI Secretary Pascual. These two officials are well respected in the local and international business and investment community. It will provide a more conducive environment for business and investments. And indeed, as you can see on my terminal now, from, trading sideways and everyone on the sidelines, as it took quite some time for this team to be assembled, finally some signs of hope here. So we're up by 1 4/10%, inching our way back up to 6,700 levels, Jess.
The national government plans to borrow 250 billion pesos from the domestic market in June. Next month's borrowing plan is 25% higher than the 200 billion peso program for May. However, the government raised just 141 billion pesos from domestic borrowings this month. The Treasury says they will hold auctions for T-bills every week, which is projected to raise 75 billion pesos. Auctions for T-bonds are meanwhile projected to generate 175 billion pesos.
The Securities and Exchange Commission has partnered with Google to enforce stricter regulatory compliance to online lending apps. Now, the regulator says Google will soon require advertisers offering cryptocurrency exchanges and wallets to present proof of their registration or license to operate in the country. Effective July 7, this rule adds to Google's existing policy that requires all advertisers to comply with local laws of any area that they are targeting. Recall that the company also recently updated its screening process for online lending apps to address predatory lending. The SEC said these efforts and their mission of educating the public on legitimate investing options through investor protection and financial literacy campaigns.
Fixing the value chain. That is one of the solutions seen by President-elect Bongbong Marcos to bring down rice prices. But for now, Marcos Jr. clarifies that this solution is a long-term goal to his campaign promise.
Aspiration is 20 pesos. I don't know. I think if we work very hard at it, baka maabot natin yun. That's the aspiration. Kausap ko na yung mga ibang trader. Baka pwede nating i-hold ng ilang buwan yung presyo ngayon. I think we'll be able to do it as a first step. But in the long term, we really have to fix our value chain.
Marcos Jr. adds that the government should also address issues that come with the aging of farmers. The president-elect says he aims to advance farming technologies to encourage the younger generation to take an interest in agriculture.
Statistics is 56, 57, whatever. But that's not the good number. Ang mga farmer mismo nagsasabi sa kanilang mga anak, wag kang mag-farming, ang hirap ng buhay na ito. Mag-aral na lang kayo, magtrabaho kayo sa opisina. Kaya kami naghihirap dito para hindi nyo na kailangan gawin ito. And that's why young people are not coming into agriculture. We must employ new technologies. It has to be industrial farming.
And that's a first look into the business day this Friday, May 27, 2022. Join us again Monday next week at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Happy weekend. We are One News.